Hopefully you took my advice and experimented with symbols and instances of those symbols in Animate, because we're about to move on and edit the symbol itself. Now, another way that you might want to think of symbols in their instances is that the symbol is a rubber stamp. Like you went to a specialty store and had a rubber stamp made of the outline of a flower, for example. You ink that, stamp it on a paper. When you stamp on the paper, that thing that shows up on the paper is the instance. So if you went in and you colored it in on the paper, all you're doing is changing the instance. You're not changing the rubber stamp. The rubber stamp still lives on its own, just like the symbol lives on its own in the library. Now we're going to edit a symbol. Whereas before, we were just editing the instances of the symbols. So let's look at the animation that I made before. This file contains a simple animation on the top layer and then a bunch of static instances of the symbol on the layer below. There are two ways to edit a symbol. The most straightforward way is right from the library. So we click on Library, we click on the symbol, and if we double click here on the preview, that takes us into editing mode. Now, some things to be aware of here is look at this breadcrumb trail. This lets us know that we're no longer on the main stage of Adobe Animate. If we click on this back arrow, now we are. And we're in what's called Scene 1. And you're automatically in Scene 1. And most of the time you only ever have one scene, but you could have multiple scenes. But we're not worried about that right now. So I double click on the preview in my library. It takes me deeper inside the program, and I'm now inside of the symbol called oval. Now, it's kind of like we just did a time reversal. It looks a lot like when we first created the symbol. In fact, if we have the symbol selected and we go to Properties, it tells us that it's a shape. Now, that's kind of hard to wrap your mind around at first, but inside of the symbol, it's whatever it started out as, which could have been text, could have been a shape, could even be an image. So once we're inside of the edit mode, now we could add to the symbol. We could, in fact, let's do something here where we subtract from the symbol. So I'm just going to grab the eraser tool, play around with the left and right bracket keys until I get this the size I want. Here I'm just making it a little bit bigger, and I'm just going to erase a little section out of the center here. Okay, now I'm going to go back to the main timeline by clicking on reversing my bread trails. And you can see that every instance of the symbol now has a hole in it. And if we look in the library, we still only have the one and only symbol, and we can see in the preview what we did to it. If I scrub the playhead here, I can see that I still get my animation from one instance of the symbol to another. The second way to edit a symbol is right from the stage. And to do that, you just simply double click on one of the instances of the symbol. So let's go ahead and do that. I'll just pick, I'm going to go back to my selection tool, and I'll pick this one. Now, it looks sort of similar to the isolation edit mode that you get from the library. You still have the breadcrumbs. You still feel a bit like you went back in time. And if we click on the symbol itself, go to Properties, it's a shape, all that's the same. The biggest difference is that we see transparency of the other instances. So this editing mode can be handy if you are about to add to the symbol and you don't want it to start clashing or banging into other instances of the symbol on the stage. So for this edit, let's just go ahead and grab the classic brush tool. We'll, just to make it obvious what we're doing here, I'll click on the swatches and I'll pick, oh, I had the symbol selected, so it changed the color of the symbol. So let me Command Z that. Let me go back to my selection tool, select away so that nothing is selected. Then I'll grab the brush tool again, and it looks like it remembered my color change to red. If not, just go inside, pick your red. Now with this red brush tool selected, I'm going to go over here to Properties, change the size down a little bit. And so this is the instance that I'm editing. So I'm just going to draw out something from here and do it again up here. And see how this went too far into this one? So if I don't like that, I can Command Z and then just redraw that a little bit smaller, and now nothing's banging into each other. Click back on the breadcrumb, and as you can see, that has made a change to every one of our instances, including the one that we put a tint on and animated. It might be a good time for you to pause this video and truly make sure that you understand the difference between a symbol and an instance, and editing an instance versus editing the symbol itself. Next, we are going to move on to actually doing some more stuff on the project. So let's go ahead and open up that file that we made earlier, which was basically just the setup of the project. Now, if you lost it or whatever, just backtrack through the video, go through the steps of creating it, learn the lesson from that, make sure you pay attention to where you save stuff and so on. All right, so the first thing we need to do is create the symbol that we're going to be editing. Now, you can just simply follow along with me and watch this video and pause it and do as I do, but some people like to have the finished product opened up in front of them. So I've made a couple ways that you can do that. So first of all, you definitely want to be looking at this project page so you have all the copy and paste text. But I've added to the project page video of body of animation. And you can either watch it directly on YouTube or you could download it if you want by clicking on this button. It's about 2.5 meg, and that looks like this time it opened it up inside of a window here in my browser. So let's just say that's good enough for now. If it's not, I can always email the class the file if you want it, since it's only 2.5 meg. But basically what you have here is the entity, the final thing, and you can pull this up as you're working on it. So first thing we're going to make is this. This is the symbol that we are going to create, and it's a complex symbol. It's made up of multiple shapes and text. And the project page gives the details of what we will be creating together, which is 170 pixel square with a white fill and a yellow stroke, and the yellow stroke is 10 pixels. Inside of this new document that we created for the project, we are going to go to the shape tools. We're going to grab the rectangle tool, and we'll dial in as much information as we can in the properties. So we know that we wanted a stroke of yellow, a fill of white, and we wanted the stroke width to be 10 pixels. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm doing that in the wrong place. It's right here, stroke size. This is actually details that you can dial in for the width of the stroke. In other words, different styles for it. But right here, we just want to put in 10. And with that information dialed in, we're just going to go ahead and click and drag. And we're just going to take a guess at the size. It really doesn't matter because I'm going to show you how we can edit this after the fact. But I'm still clicking and dragging. If I hold down the Shift key while I do that, I can actually constrain the proportions and make a square. But let's say I even forgot to do that. Once this rectangle is drawn, all we have to do is take our selection tool, drag a marquee around the whole entire thing, And this properties panel starts telling us about the object that we have selected. And all we have to do is go over here to the width and the height and dial in the information that we were given, which is 170 by 170. Hit tab or return. We may want to get a view of our stage in its entirety, and we can either do that by double clicking on the hand tool or going up to here and selecting fit in window. Either one does the same. Move on and make the next shape for our symbol, which was that circle. And let's get the details for that. It's an 80 pixel circle with a red fill and a 4-point blue stroke. Let's go back over to this area here with these tools. Let's grab the oval tool. We will go ahead, let's just draw it. I'm going to hold down the shift key so I get a circle. Now I'm going to go to my selection tool. I'm going to select that, and then I'm going to enter in all of the properties that I wanted. So I know that stroke size was 4 pixels. I think I accidentally said points before, but sometimes they're the same. Let's see, our fill color was red and our stroke blue. Now we could have dialed in this information ahead of time like we did for the square, but I'm just trying to show you different ways to get there. I'm going to place this circle nicely inside of the square. There's two things to keep in mind. One is, if you're familiar with other programs, you can usually just select them, go to the align tool and do your alignments. But for whatever reason, even though that circle was drawn second, Animate for many versions has been not keeping track of that. So not a problem. Let me just Command Z that. Let me remind you of the other issue is that if these are on the same layer and we go to select one and move it later, it does that whole cutout thing. So Command Z a couple times to get back to where we were. So all we're going to do is we're going to put one of these on a different layer. And rather than doing an edit and paste onto another layer and have to make a new layer, we can do that all in one step. All we have to do is pick the one entity that we want to go to a different layer. Go up to Modify, Timeline, and Distribute to Layers. And you can see what happens is it created another layer. And if we toggle the eyeballs of the layer underneath this thing that looks like an eyeball, we can see that it is on layer 2, and then we have our original rectangle or square on layer 1. Normally I'm a big fan of naming layers, but since these aren't going to exist on separate layers for long, we won't bother naming them. Now what we can do is select both with our selection tool. Click Draw Marquee around them. We're going to go back to alignment here, and it really doesn't matter whether align to stage is checked or not. I'm going to check it just so you can see what it does. It keeps the stage in mind when it's aligning things. So if you don't want that to happen, you just simply uncheck it. But in this case, we're going to click Align Horizontal Center, and then we're going to click over here Align Vertical Center. You can see we still have the problem where the circle is underneath, but we can fix that now easily by taking the layer and moving it up above. Now that I see these together, I realized there was a step I skipped back a little while ago, which was to resize the circle down to the proper size given, which was 80 pixels. So we can fix that now. If we go in here, this is one thing to keep in mind, and we make a selection like this. This is where you have to be careful with strokes. We actually only selected the center of that. Now, what we could do, there's two different ways we could select that. One is we could lock the layer with the rectangle on it, make a marquee swipe so that we're only getting the circle. But another way, if we want to select everything that's on a layer, is we just simply click on that keyframe and we get everything on the layer that's on that particular keyframe. So now we have the fill and the stroke. Now if we go into Object in the properties panel. So 80 pixels for the width, 80 pixels for the height, and then we just need to realign, select both of them, bring out the alignment tool, select this one, and now we're getting much closer. Now we just need to move up the circle to make room for our text. So let's go ahead and select that entire circle by clicking here. Gives us the fill in the stroke. And then I'll hold down the Shift key and click the up arrow key maybe 2 times. If I'm picky, maybe I'll come down a couple times without holding down Shift. Shift just multiplies by 10 the amount of pixels that it's moving. Okay, so now our last step is to create our text. We're going to write out the word symbol. I'm never one to turn down an opportunity to copy and paste, so I'm copying the word symbol in capital letters, and that's going to be in Helvetica if you're on a Mac, or Arial if you're on a PC, and that's going to be 20 points. So we go over here, we grab the text tool, and just to make our life super easy here, before we grab the text tool, let's make one more layer. Again, we won't worry about naming it for now, but we know this is the 3rd layer on the top here. Then we'll grab the text tool, we'll click with the text tool anywhere on the stage, and we'll Command V, and we'll paste out the word symbol. Now yours may have come out in the wrong color, so whatever color you got, you want to go in here to the fill, under properties, with object selected, change the fill to black, change the font to either Arial or Helvetica New or Helvetica, or at least something that looks very much like this, and you want the size to be dialed in at 20 points. Now we'll just toggle the eyeball to find out. Oh, it looks like yeah, okay, we did put that on the correct layer. If not, you could just cut and paste it onto the right layer. What I'm trying to do here is I don't want to move the circle, so, and I believe that was on layer 2. So let's lock that layer. We go over to the lock, and this time we can draw a marquee with the selection tool, and we get only the text and this box that we made. And this time we'll align and align this way. We'll actually turn the eyeball off on layer 2, and then we'll grab just the symbol, and we'll use the down arrow key, maybe with the Shift key, and we'll turn back on, and we'll just, using all the little tricks that we've learned for selection, we will make this so there's a decent uniform amount of space around here so it looks good. One thing I forgot to mention is you want to make sure this text you created is static text. It should have defaulted to that, but click on it, make sure. If it was set to anything else, just simply click, use a down arrow, change it to static text. Okay, and now our very last step for this video is to select every single thing here. So make sure that nothing is locked over here, and that you do indeed have a selection that contains everything. Now we're going to convert this to a symbol with the shortcut of F8. Let's go back to the project page and get the proper name for that symbol. So I'll just select this, Command C, copy, go back to animate, Command V to paste, make sure that the graphic type or the symbol type is graphic. We'll put the registration in the center. We'll talk more about that later. And click OK. And we now have a symbol in our library.